Chapter 5. A new capital for the new nation. Keep in mind the big question. How did Washington, D.C. become the capital of the United States? Federal City. Here is a puzzler to stump your friends with. What do the following cities have in common? Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Lancaster, Pennsylvania. York, Pennsylvania. Princeton, New Jersey. Trenton, New Jersey. Annapolis, Maryland. And New York, New York. The answer: each city was once the capital of the United States of America. Several served as the capital during the War for Independence. Several others served during the days of the Articles of Confederation. In each of those cities today, you will find a historical marker proudly stating that it was once the capital. The truth is, though, that when the government was weak and unimportant, none of those places cared much about being the capital. However, the new Constitution set up a strong national government. People cared very much about the location of the capital. New York, where the President Washington had took the oath of office, was just a temporary capital. The Constitution expected that a state or several states would give the new government a chunk of land for a permanent capital. Several states offered that land. They wanted to have a capital nearby because many businesses and visitors would come to their states. In 1790, Congress accepted an offer from Maryland and Virginia. The land was near the middle of the states that then made up the United States. Congress also made Philadelphia the temporary capital for the next 10 years while the new capital was being built. President Washington chose the exact piece of land, which was to be called the Territory of Columbia. It is now known as the District of Columbia, or D.C. The president selected a site across the Potomac River from his own home at Mount Vernon. The plan was for the government building to be located in one part of the district. That part was called the Federal City, or the City of Washington. Later on, it became known as Washington District of Columbia, or Washington, D.C. President Washington hired a well-known surveyor, Andrew Ellicott, to map out the area. Ellicott needed a scientific assistant for this work, someone who knew a lot about mathematics. He chose a self-taught African American named Benjamin Banneker. Together, Ellicott and Banneker surveyed the district, noting every feature of the land. To design the federal city, President Washington hired an engineer named Pierre Lafon. He was a French army officer who had fought in the Continental Army. He first met George Washington at Valley Forge. Lafon was a brilliant architect and engineer. Unfortunately, he had a terrible temper. He always had to have his way. This got him in trouble with a lot of people, including Washington and Jefferson. Lafon was fired less than a year into the job. During that time, though, Lafon used Ellicott and Banneker's survey to lay out the basic plan for the city of Washington. He adopted Jefferson's idea for the grid system for the city streets. A grid system looks like lines on a checkerboard. Then he added several broad avenues that spread out from the center, like spokes on a wheel. His plan set aside spaces for the main government buildings. The Capitol would be set on a hill. Capitol is the building where the members of the Senate and House of Representatives, or the legislative branch, meet. The word Capitol refers to the city. The president's palace was to be located on lower ground, with a fine view of the Potomac River. The president's palace was later called the President's House, and still later the White House. Lafon also reserved open spaces for parks, monuments, and fountains. It was a beautiful plan. After Lafon left, the government decided to hold contests for the best designs for the Capitol and for the president's palace. The winners presented handsome drawings of what the buildings should look like, but they did not know how to draw the actual construction plans. Before those buildings came to look like they do today, many other people would contribute to their ideas, and many more years would pass. Nevertheless, by 1800, those buildings and several others were ready enough to be used. So in that year, right on schedule, the government moved from Philadelphia to its new home. A few people had bought land in the part known as Federal City or Washington. They built homes, boarding houses, and other places of business. They were looking ahead to a time when the government would move there. The buildings were far apart, and there were tree stumps everywhere. None of the roads were paved. You can imagine what they were like when it rained. President Adams and his family moved to the president's house in November 1800. We don't have to guess what the Adams family thought about their new home. We have letters that Abigail Adams, the president's wife, wrote to members of her family. Abigail Adams reported that on that day they arrived, not a single room had been completely finished. In some rooms, the plaster walls were still damp. The main staircase to the second floor was also unfinished. Abigail Adams turned one of the large, unfinished rooms into a laundry room where her family wash was hung to dry. This was before the days of furnaces. A furnace is the machine or the device in your home that produces heat. People depended on fireplaces for warmth. There was a fireplace in each room of the president's house to take the chill off and keep the house dry. That was fine, but nobody had thought to supply firewood. It turned out that the president was responsible for supplying his own. There was also no well for water. Servants had to carry water from a distance of 5 city blocks. Still, Abigail Adams found much to like about the house. She could see its possibilities, as she could see the possibilities for the young republic. Unfinished? Yes, they both were. But Abigail was sure that the new house, like the new nation, would become great. She knew this house was not built for a year or a decade. She wrote to her sister, "This house is built for ages to come."